Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Danny Morley, and today I'm joined by 4 other mystical life coaches from Masters of Self University who all have children, because today we are talking about parents and children of the divine. So for this men's panel, it's our 3rd edition. We're really going to go into what it means to be a parent and have children, and still do this work from an elevated place. So I just like to invite all the panelists to just introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chad Emmerich. I'm a mystical life coach with Masters of Self University, and I have an 8-year-old son, and I'm also currently working with a family as a nanny for their 3-year-old son and 7-year-old daughters. This is a very important topic for me at the moment.
Hey, thanks, Chad. I'm Roger Schultz. I'm a mystical life coach here at Masters of Self. I have a 18-year-old that just graduated, and I also have a 25-year-old who is a police officer here locally. So, being able to incorporate a lot of these tools and methodologies and how we guide, our kids through the growth process has been very special to learn and utilize in how I show up with my boys.
Hi, and I'm William Thien. I have a 6-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old daughter.
Hi, I'm mystical life coach Gregoire, and I have a 6-year-old son, and I'm really happy to dig in that topic with you guys today.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for the intros, gents. And obviously, I'm 30 years old, but I do not have kids. So I today am really going to play the student. I think one day I may have them. We'll see. I'm let going all of my attachment to that happening, and if it's in my cards, so be it. But I understand the role, even as a mystical life coach, of understanding how to parent a child, because the work that we do here at Masters of Self University is we learn to actually parent our own inner child. And while I haven't got any experience with a real life child, I really have formed an amazing bond with the inner me. The inner me normally shows up around 5 years old, and I've formed a really good bond with him, learning how to nurture and give him care and give him what he needs. And the main thing that he tells me is he's angry at the things that he didn't receive when he was a kid. So even that, if you're out there and you're listening right now, just because you don't have children, or maybe you're not a parent yet, it doesn't mean you can't have a takeaway from this podcast, because what all these beautiful gentlemen in front of me are going to offer, you can actually apply to yourself. You can apply this to your own inner child and learn how to better navigate yourself. So Chad, before we were starting this podcast, we were talking backstage, and you were mentioning the way of patience. So I'd love for you to start off this whole conversation on parents and children.
Absolutely. What a lesson indeed. I'm sure we've all had this experience as parents. The way of patience, as referenced in Mason's Way, the 20 Universal Ways of Oneness, is a difficult lesson if you're coming from the old parenting model where I was raised in, where it's simply do what you're told. Your emotions don't matter. Your opinion doesn't matter. But when you can show up with patience and understanding with your children, and as I said, in my situation, I'm currently working as a nanny for a 3-year-old boy, which is bringing me back to some old memories of practicing that patience and bringing that to the present rather than talking about, when I first began the way of patience with my son when he was around 4.5, 5 years old. So I have a challenge currently working with the way of patience in a young child, but practicing that's honoring, using the way of patience to honor their opinion, hear them out, listen to the whys, listen to the hows, and allowing them some freedom. With yourself, you need to practice, the boundaries of safety around what they're asking to do or what they're inquiring about, but allowing them that freedom. And on yourself, you're practicing patience to watch it unfold, to allow them to have that experience and to not control or overshadow or bring your own opinion or your own experience to what they're having right now. And I'd love to hear other people's experience in this as well.
Yeah, I know for me, learning to be patient with myself is actually one of the big things I'm working on right now. I have a tendency to just want to just get things done and get all the way to the end, especially with my healing journey. And so for me, I've really had to come back to myself and be like, no, before you can get to surrender, there's patience first. By understanding the ways of oneness and the order that they come in, I have to be patient in order to fully surrender. And I think one of the things for me that was really holding my healing journey back over the last few years was this need to get to the finish line. And now I'm really starting to sink in and just being patient and honoring where I'm at. So I can only imagine what a lesson that must come through with a young being that you're guiding in their whole life, because at that age, whoever their caregiver is, that's it. They're like God to them. So I'm sure patience is a huge thing. Roger, are you gonna comment on that?
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that share, Chad. Resonates a ton, over in this space, just from growing up. I learned to do everything by force. From my mom to my stepfather, to grandparents, other aunts, uncles, things like that, my other brothers. Everything was done through force. To get things done, you forced it through. To accomplish a task, you forced it. If it wasn't moving, then you found a way to just push the square peg through the round hole. So that was a big part of my parenting style, was what you were talking about, like do as I say. Your opinions don't matter, your voice doesn't matter. um, and when my son was about like 11, 12, or 13, my beloved Adrian, she just has she had this really soft, like, her communication style with Robbie was just so beautiful. And I was like, I want to be able to communicate with my son that way. Like, there was this huge draw, and there was a jealousy to it and envy to it, so there was these wounds that were being projected into that space, and that affected my communication style with Robbie. It affected my communication style with Adrian. But yeah, a lot of it was just, you're seen, not heard, so again, to Chad's expression, like allowing your children to have those emotions, not demonizing them, not making them wrong, not shaming them for how they're feeling. And that's like translated into some of the young kids I work with on the football field. Whereas before, a young boy, and now even girls, jumping into the sport, which is awesome, they would cry. Like something would happen, they would get hit, and cry or have an injury or something like that. Whereas before, my style was very like in your face, very aggressive, like shrug it off, walk it off, like no crying in football, none of this. And now it's getting down on their level, meeting them where they're at, allowing them to express the emotion that they're wanting to express, diving into like why, like what the injury is. It physical? Is it emotional? I mean, a lot of these kids have their parents there, and they have these injuries, and it's to get attention. Like, that's how they know how to get attention from their parents. So having this toolkit that we have, like being able to sit down with them and just be present in that moment with them. Like, put your arm around them. Like, hey, it's okay. This is a physical game. Like, do you need to sit out? Do you need to do something here? Versus like get up and walk it off. So that's yeah, kind of dovetail a little bit off Chad from that side, but yeah, that's transitioning into this newer, more mystical model of parenting.
I wanted to add there, like the connection that you see. I just envision you speaking to the children, get down on a knee, looking them in the eye, and being there with them, and what you feel there. I could hear it in your voice, Roger. Like that experience is so much different than the all right, up and at 'em, let's go. It is getting down there and establishing that connection. There's a trust that gets built.
Yeah, I mean, like, Rachel talks about, we talk about, like, the divine sacred masculine. There's no judgment. And within that, layer of no judgment, there's safety and security and honor, harmlessness and gentleness. How do you create that wrapper for your kids or people that you're coaching, or children that you're coaching, interacting with, to feel heard, to feel safe in expressing, what's going on? Because 9 times out of 10, a kid, like football's a physical game. You're going to get nicked. You're going to get scratched. All this type of stuff happens. But again, it's a notion of sitting down, like to your point, Chad, like sitting them on their level, being present and listening. Like nothing else matters in that moment than that connection with that young kid, to say, you know what, we have 30 other kids out here doing these things. I'm going to hang out here with you, make sure that you're good and that you're seen, you're heard, that you feel safe. And if you don't want to keep playing, then don't keep playing. That's perfectly okay. Let me know when you're ready to come in, and we'll find a spot and we'll get that going for you. And sometimes, like, football isn't for you, and that's okay. Parents, dads, it's okay if your kid doesn't want to play football and you want to shove them into the sport. Like, surrender to the notion that your kid just may not want to play football. It's perfectly fine.
That reminds me a lot of when I was a kid. I was always been a highly sensitive being, always. And I felt like I had to shove myself into this paradigm of, masculinity of what I thought it was. And I would try sports like rugby, and I would get I was so skinny, and I would just get like beaten up a lot, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. But I did it because I felt like I have to, and I felt like if I wasn't doing that kind of thing, then I wasn't a man. And I didn't play it outside of school. I did play soccer, which is obviously the big sport in the UK. But I ended up eventually just walking away from it. And, one of the things that it brought up in that, what you said, there was no one there like honoring any pain. All the teachers in the school, it was always like, we're doing this, and you're men, and this is the way it's going to be, and it's going to be rough. And it's like, well, what if I get hurt and then I have to like kind of like deal with that? Like, I'm not the same as all these like big muscly kids who, and I can look back now and I just imagine if Roger was my coach in school, what a different experience. Maybe I would have felt more seen and heard, and maybe I would have felt more enthused to actually do it, because if I was going to get in pain, there would have been this elevated being who was going to honor it instead of just dismissing my sensitivities as a child. So amazing. Before we move on from this topic, does anyone else have anything they'd like to comment?
Yeah, what comes through for me is patience for yourself as well in these moments. What I've found with myself and my children is how I would be approaching them from my own wounding and not having that patience within myself. And then also having an expectation of what I wanted the outcome to be, or what I want my child to be doing, how I want my oldest daughter, for example, to experience things. And there was a lot of guilt that I went through and shame with the contrast between my two daughters. With my there's a 4-year spread between the two. And so my parenting style with my oldest daughter started out from my wounding with a lot of force. And, for example, she doesn't like to eat much. She has she's a very picky eater. And as energy that she needs to strive. And what I realized was that I couldn't force her to do anything. And the more that I tried to force, the more resistance that I received from her. And it wasn't until I actually started to step back and honor her for her being her own unique human, and really just listen to her and get curious about what she's saying.
Yeah. Can I add something? Yeah, I'm totally in tune with that, because I think the main obstacle in being patient with kids is that they will trigger our own wounds. And so that's very difficult, like to keep calm and patient when the kids are actually pressing your button and activating your own wounds. And so that's where the work that we propose here enters and play a big role in being able to work on your programs and know what to do when they kick in. And also there is, as William was saying, there is this projecting, like we think we know how it should be. So we're trying to push the kid into something that most of the time is again some programs also as well, and unconsciously we're trying to push the kid in our own programming. And so yeah, there is many facets to that topic, and it's very challenging. And at the same time, this is a beautiful, we are training, because when we cannot be patient and allow the kid to get to know himself, actually what's end up, it's us being on the way, and it end up in a power struggle. Like, okay, the kid feels that way, and it's really, under a certain age, it's really like there is no breaks to it. It's just the kid is always present, fully present, that we are not. And actually he has this sense arising from it, and we'll go against that, pushing in another direction. So it makes this power struggle. And actually, unconsciously, what we're doing is that we're training the kid to get into those, power struggles again and again and again. Oh, you want to go that way? And then this is picked up and will go on, because when we work on ourselves and on our own child wounds, we'll find a lot of those power struggle where actually I cannot allow myself. It became very difficult to allow myself to feel all my feelings, to honor what I deeply feel, and my tests and my, so yeah, it's ended up like us struggling with our own self in the big, like in the letter. And it's like unconsciously we're training the kids to struggle with what they're feeling. And
yeah, I totally agree. And what another thing that brings up for me with patience is communication, and being able to communicate with our children where we're at, and understand that if we're triggered, at that point, we are raising our children from that trigger, the age we are when we're triggered at that point. And so an example for me is with my daughter, with my oldest daughter, because she's 12, she's going out, spending a lot of time with friends, and now going out on weekends, and that's a big deal. And setting a boundary with her was a big first step. Setting the boundary. But what I realized was I was setting boundaries with her, but if she did not respect that boundary, I hadn't preset within myself what her consequence would be. What would she be doing if she didn't respect that boundary? And so she would come home, for example, maybe late, and I would be acting out from my wounding with her because I hadn't communicated within myself what or how I would be approaching a situation. I had the expectation that the boundary would be set and then it would just be met. And then, so what I've ended up doing now and with her is we set the boundary, and then we communicate what would happen if that boundary is not set, if that boundary is not met ahead of time, so that we both know there's open communication. And I found that with her and doing it that way, number one, she knows what could happen if the boundary's not respected. That's been communicated. And secondly, if she doesn't show up on time, for example, or breaks a different boundary, then I'm not trapped as a 5 or 6 year old boy trying to parent a 12-year-old girl.
That's a beautiful way of looking at it.
That was beautiful, William.
Yeah. For anyone listening that didn't quite understand what William just said, when we get triggered, when a wound from our childhood is activated, energetically, we are returning to that age. So when William is triggered by, setting these expectations, and he's back at whatever wound that was causing it, he's back at this 6-year-old self. He's then having to show up as a 6-year-old to his 12-year-old daughter, which is extremely obviously difficult. At 6, how are you supposed to parent? So wow, what a beautiful line. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And to recognize the power in yourself and what you give to your child when you can admit to that, like William said, communicating that, saying, listen, this is mine and this is what I'm working on. And you make it that you're both working towards these goals, to let them know that we are not perfect, that we make mistakes too. These are things that I'm working on. Let's work on this together. I love when I can do that with my son, or I mean, it's with anyone, but when with your own child, to admit to a fault or a weakness or something that you want to work on together with them, you're doing it together. It's just, it's an amazing experience. And thanks for bringing that up, William. It's beautiful.
I'd love to ask you all a question, because this I've heard this notion before on a podcast, and I thought it was excellent. And I believe it was Kyle Kingsbury, and he was saying that he was parenting his child, and he made a mistake, and he basically said to his child, well, what do you think I should do? And his child looked up at him and said, why are you asking me? You're the parent. And he's like, you think I know what I'm doing? You're my first child. I've never done this before. And he said that once he introduced this whole concept of him being a novice parent, and to ask him for the advice of how he should be punished, or what he should do in this situation, said it changed the dynamic of the parent, and it allowed the child to start to understand that he's not this godlike, perfect human that is not making any mistakes or doesn't have it all together. Because I think from our children's eye, they look up, and I did as a child, to my parents, and starting this work, I've had to come to realize, oh, my parents weren't gods. oh, okay, they are imperfect, just like everyone else. And just understanding that has allowed me to bring a lot of compassion to them. But has anyone had that experience with their children where they've kind of gone to them and allowed them to see from their point of view?
Yeah, there is a sense of vulnerability and authenticity that has to, because we misinterpret the responsibilities of being a parent. So sometimes we want to put on that mask of I'm the parent, and you have to do as I say, even though I'm not knowing like perfectly what I'm doing. And there is this sense of like letting the kid know, like, for example, we were talking about patience, and this is a goal, right? We are not always patient with a 6-year-old, and time will go, like you're stressed out, time is running by, the kid doesn't want to put his shoes, and things happening, and you will get triggered at some point. And it's really important, just as everybody was saying, to let the kid know that your emotional triggers are not his fault and his responsibility. And so sometimes some impulse can come up, and it's very important to take some time afterward to say, that is really challenged right now, and he got pissed off, but he's not pissed off because of you. This is belonging to me, sometimes it's challenging for me as well, and this has nothing to do with you, right, dude? So don't take it personally. You did great, but daddy's pissed off right now, and this has nothing to do with you. It's my stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. That's fantastic.
Yeah, no, Greg, that was just put a smile on my face. It was just like to dovetail off Danny and William and the feedback. Like I had this recent scenario with my son, and a situation happened. Adrian and I brought it up to him, and he just got super defensive, immediately went on the defense. And I'm like, oh, I see where that's coming from. Like you have these like great tools where you can look back and you see the behavior. In this particular instance, my son get immediately defensive, and you're like, oh, I used to do that. Was me. Like, oh, I know where he learned that from. Like how amazing is it? Now I can sit back, watch it unfold, surrender to his defensiveness, his anger, his discomfort, and just like, hey, buddy, I can see that this topic is a little uncomfortable for you. Like, how can what exactly is being triggered in you right now? What's being activated in you right now? Because this is how I used to show up. Like, how many times in our father-son relationship did I show up in the way that you are expressing yourself right now? And just to watch him pause and just go, a lot. Like, yeah, buddy, like I am seeing me in you right now. Like, how can we like what is it about this topic? Like, what is it that is bringing you to the state of defensiveness? And do you not feel safe? Do you not feel like this, like what is it? Like, what's the push pull? Like, how can I or mom and I guide you through this? Is this something we want, that you would want to be guided through? Or you just want us to listen, and do you want to vent? Do you want to raise? Like, okay, cool, we can do that. Whereas before it was just bare knuckles, pugilistic, like going at it, and it just like that ability to see deeply into your children's behavior and to know where it comes from, and to go, oh, this has everything to do with me and how I parented. And now I can sit back because I've worked through these things. And to Danny's point, like parenting your inner child, growing and maturing that inner child up to a place where, and then to like William, like when we are triggered, parenting from a 5 or 6 year old inner child, like now through this work, like I can parent from like a whole 46-year-old, I don't want to say enlightened, but elevated perspective, So it just creates a much different conversation, creates a much different energy, a much more grounded, safe, secure energy for in this case, my son, to express what he needed to express. Like, he wanted to get sure, man, get defensive. If you want to get angry, yeah, get angry. Is that what you want to express? Do you need to get that off your chest? Okay, cool. We'll create the space to do that. And then just sit there, go like, Rob, this all comes from me. So how can I help you, guide you through this pain, like through this vulnerability? What can I do for you in this space? So it's just a really interesting switch in how to approach the challenging conversations with your kids. Whereas before it would just be like, F you, and no, you're wrong, I'm wrong, you're right, you know what I mean? And it's a much it's awesome. Like, that's about the best way I can put it.
That's beautiful. And now we're really getting into the depths of what it means to do this work and be a parent. That is such a beautiful share, Roger, because you're really showing how you've taken ownership and responsibility for something that you've seen in your child that is you. And instead of just brushing it off, you're now actively trying to help him or her with whatever program you're seeing, and you're recognizing, oh wow, that's me. Yeah, let me work on healing this. And then I think a lot of parents may just avoid that or not even be aware of it. And the fact that you're able to now recognize the program in your children, it's amazing. And you've got lucky children. But that perfectly segue into the next topic that I wanted to talk about is, what is it like for you all to go through this work now versus how you parented before? Because clearly, Roger, for you, this has allowed you, and maybe we can start with Roger. Let's stay on this topic of this defensiveness. Now, what relationship did that create with your child where they were able to be heard or express themselves or just vent or whatever it is? What dynamic has that changed between you and them?
Yeah, I mean, it's he's 18 years old, so he's a young man, he's a young adult. It's the topic that we got into was sex in the home, right? Whereas as he's growing up, like, we had a very open, honest conversation and dialogue about that topic as he grew up. And so moving through that, getting to a point with him where I let go of this notion of there is no sex in the home, or the parent, like, honored, like, that's like, respect the home, respect this, respect that. Very, very rigid in that approach. And through this process, like, it was a huge growing process for me as well. Just like, you know what, if you want to have sex in the home, that's fine. However, to William's point, like, these are the parameters of how this takes place. You want to be treated like an adult? Fantastic. You want to have sex in the home? Okay. But you will now pay rent. There is an adult-like responsibility that comes with the responsibility of what you're asking or what we're talking about right now. It's not a punishment, and that's a fine line too, as a parent, like, going through this stuff. It's like, and when you start asking yourself those questions around, as you move through this work, like, is this a punishment? Is this controlling? Okay, now we're becoming much more aware of how we're communicating, right? Like, and how we want to move through this. And at some point in time, like, we're all human. We're all like, we're going to get pissed off. We're going to get out of balance, and being able to, like, take ourselves back to center, in those moments is crucial. But yeah, it was just this interesting letting go of a paradigm and a shift in how I showed up as a dad. Very, very rigid, very forceful, and like navigating that whole piece of this topic. And when we brought it to his attention, that's where the defensiveness came up. That's where the anger came up. and seeing all those programs that I had passed down to him, it's like, holy shit, man, like I can now actually like walk him through, and Adrian can walk him through like this navigation of awareness, there, and having those consequences. Like if you want to do this, great, okay, but here is like the path to do that. This is what's going to come with that adult behavior.
To me, it sounds more like a responsibility.
Yeah, it's a way of responsibility. It's shifting from this notion of, that's a great point, Greg, like shifting from this notion of overwatch, right? Like I've got to like care and do all these things, make sure they have food and clothes and all these like very basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs met, to a more elevated spiritual, loving, divine responsibility, patience. Like he's now seeing patience in me, right? Like how great is that? Like, to dads and, even Danny and your relationship, William, with you and your daughters, Greg, and you're just like, when you show up and embody the ways, like they see, that's the teaching. You don't have to like talk. You just show up in these ways and your kids feel that energy and they're like, huh, that's powerful.
I like where you went there, Roger. Absolutely. It is the sitting with them in that moment, not dismissing, because I believe when I started parenting, I was more coming from a demeaning, dismissive type of parenting model. But sitting with them, you gain so much trust and understanding and connection with your children. They will open up to you. They'll be more responsible because you've given them more responsibility, right? You've shown more trust, and they will be more responsible. They'll be more willing to share with you. I hear the fact that my son can tell me that, he's 8 and he can come to me and say, I'm scared right now, because that's nothing I would have been able to go up to my parents. I wouldn't have felt comfortable, because it would have been, get out of here with that. Go deal with it. But he can come up and say he's scared, and I get down and speak with him and hold him, ask him what he needs. And because that's what, first, it's what I would have wanted. Right. But I can tell that that's what he needs too. That's what he needs right now. And coming from that, you're going to get much more responsive children. You're going to get that trust. You're going to get teenagers that talk to you, right? Roger's teenager talks to him. Look at that, dude, he did it. So all that comes along with this process. And when you find it, you can still work on it. So I don't want to say that because I started when my son was 5, or I'm currently working with, a 3-year-old, you can still start this with your teenager. It's just getting used to it. There'll be those moments of discomfort and that newness of being vulnerable, but you'll get the reward of seeing that connection when you see them show up, or they see you show up, and you feel that, energy in that moment. Thanks for bringing that up, Roger.
Greg, I'm going to invite you next. I'd love you to share your experience before this work, and now as a mystical life coach, but also mystical parent.
Thank you for that opportunity. Yeah, for me, it was a big point about coming to this program, because I would see my child like catching up on my patterns, and I would be like horrified, like, no, don't go there, dude, back up, like stop. and owning it like fully, like, oh fuck, this is like little me when I freak out. And so yeah, first of all, the big change is the clarity you get through that work, because by healing your own wounds and your own inner child, you get so deep within the pain of the child and the consciousness of a child, like so innocent, so connected, and how over and over again this very beautiful and divine place of being that actually the child is reminding us of. And in that moment, we are so blinded that we want to impose all those things that most of the time are not working, dysfunctional, and useless. And so the work, by going there, you get that very deep clarity about how how the programs work, how they completely distort your perception. And so the more you work on them, the more clarity, veil after veil, you get more and more clarity about, oh, this is a program. This is coming from a wound, and I don't want to act from there, to project my wounds to that little being or to anyone else, and so patience is important, and there is also this place of validating and openness. So instead of contracting and getting into those, like, you have to do as I say, you have to be what I think is right, which is conditioning and most of the time bullshit, and there is this openness of, like, let me discover and learn from your own connection and own innocence, and because this is beautiful, and can I be so much in the present moment that I can connect to that, and make room for that to bloom. So this is a big shift, is owning your shit instead of projecting them to others. Going through the work, you get this awesome, like, clarity about how those programs work, how you've been dumped so many dysfunctional program on you, and how difficult it is to get out of them. And so you're getting experimental knowledge about how to deal with the child, because you're doing it on your inner child. So it changed everything, actually.
Before this podcast, Greg, you mentioned about the learning aspect and the safe container that you create, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like, with your child, you get to learn more about your inner child, and vice versa.
Yeah, of course. And you're also reminded about this, natural ability to be so present, to just be to feel without filters yet. You're not so deeply programmed yet, and so are you starting to see your own programs acting out in your kid? So yeah, there is this place of allowing ourselves to be totally truthful about the fact that we don't know what's best for this child. We don't know. So there is a lot of open, like, possibilities and opportunities, and we're not the one to choose from, and we're not the one to know what will be best. So there is really this sense of being reminded by the kid when necessary that, oh, I should be more open, more patient, more in the present, because I'm already thinking about what I need to do, I'm really stuck in my mind right now. And if I drop into my heart, where my child is always, like, most of the time, I can meet him where he's at, and I can learn as much as I can teach him something, like, by being an example. Like, I don't want to teach him concepts, but what I want to teach him is that you're being seen, you're being heard. Whatever comes up to you, it's okay, we'll deal with it. Maybe I will be a bit goofy about it, and you too, but it's all okay. We'll manage, and there is this beautiful space for a beautiful relationship to grow and to learn from each other.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And something else you mentioned earlier was you said, we think we know how it should be. And this is one thing that I've really learned in this work with Rachel, is understanding that my inner child doesn't see the world in the way that I do. And while we think we know how they should be showing up or how they should be, we don't, until we really understand how the inner child is feeling and what they're going through. Then there's no way for us to project our like adult version of reality. And it brings me to the whole idea of, oh, you shouldn't be feeling this way, you shouldn't be hurt because adults don't get hurt by that. Well, yeah, this is just a kid that we're dealing with right now. He doesn't understand that, a parent leaving just for a few seconds when he's 3-year-old isn't abandonment, but he may internalize that as abandonment, and that we really think we know how it should be, but we don't. And we have to really understand the view from the child.
Yeah, that's powerful. Thanks, Danny.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. And something just keeps, I'm getting prompted, like, and this is one thing that I listen to now is these promptings, and this might be a topic for another panel. But I feel like a lot of couples, parents, experiencing like separation or divorce, and I feel like there's a few of us in here that have walked those shoes. So I'd be curious, me included, from a separation perspective, like navigating the parenting dynamic, navigating an enlightened or elevated parenting dynamic within the space of a separation or divorce. And I feel like there's a lot of parents out there, a lot of people that are hurting, that are struggling immensely with this topic or with this life event. So curious, like if we want to dive into it, on another episode, but it just kind of prompted them, so I'm throwing it out there and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, I don't feel like I want to dive directly into that, but generally speaking, because that's a big topic, but generally
it's a big topic.
Yeah. Generally speaking, whenever we're dealing with a challenge and we feel like we want to protect our children from that challenge by not communicating with them, we're still hurting them. They're still picking up on our wounding. And by not labeling what is really going on and how we're really feeling, we're opening the doorway for them to create their own patterns and interpret what the feedback that they're getting from us in their own way. And from my opinion, that just opens a doorway for a whole slew of potential programs to be created within the child in their own psyche, thinking maybe there's something wrong with them. Like, why is dad not present with me? Why is he upset? Is it me? Is it something that I did? Instead of saying, like, I'm going through something. Maybe it doesn't have to be labeled specifically what that something is, but letting that child know that it's not them, that there is at least something going on.
Yeah, they will recognize it. They will feel it. And one thing that came up when you were mentioning that is if you're suppressing, and so you're saying daddy's happy when you're clearly not, they're going to learn to start to mask up, right? They're learning that from you. So yeah, being cognizant of that and sharing with your children how you're actually feeling, because they're picking up on that. They know there's something different. They know you're acting differently, and what they're seeing and they're picking up on is that mask that you're wearing in front of them to say, what you think I'm feeling isn't right, but it is, and they know. And you're teaching them to mask up, suppress, or repress.
Yeah, no, those are. I'd love to unpack this more with this group, but like to Chad and William, I mean, also the notion of competing for love. right? So mom and dad start doing these different things to compete for the child or children's love. Like, I want to be number one. We start doing all these extra things that we didn't do before when we were together, right? So we start competing. Oh, you know what, son, come over here. We're going to go to Disneyland. We're going to do this. Or I start like doing the things that are counterintuitive to how I'm built for the sake of competing for my children's love. What does that teach your kids? Wow. So like, yeah, this is something I definitely would love to dive into, because I feel like there's a lot of people out here that would really love to hear that topic and how to navigate it.
Yeah.
When we're competing, though, also in any form, we're coming from inauthenticity, and it's not a long game.
And
right?
wounding.
So, go ahead, Greg.
No. I just wanted to add and wounding. Inauthenticity and wounding.
Yeah, exactly. And when we're not authentic and we're wounded, it's not sustainable. So, like for me, my children's moms and I we're not together, and I've taken the road of the long game, being authentic with them, being stable, not expecting to try to win their love, within a month or a year or whatever, and coming at it from my own wounding, but understanding that it's a long game. Our children are going to be in our lives forever. So how can I be that stable presence that is always there? And maybe I'm not buying them all of the toys or taking them to Disneyland, but it's going to be consistent. And I feel like that consistency is very important when parenting. One thing that I have been doing with my oldest daughter, somebody brought this up earlier, was, us trying to label our children or know what's best for them and where their path is and where they're going. And I came to a point where I'm like, how do I know, what my daughter's path is and how she's going to choose her life? I'm really here as a mentor to guide her and to help show her, not even show her, but help her to see things from my perspective and offer the knowledge that I have for her in her life. So when she goes out, for example, she's hanging out with multiple people, and they are potentially doing drugs, and there's going to be kids that are drinking. And I can take the path of saying to her, there's none of that, and you will be punished, and I'm just rigid. That's the way it is. But I recognize that she will do what she wants to do when she's out with herself. And so instead, what I choose to do is to have conversations with her about this. You will be in a situation where you are with a group of girls or a group of people, or just with a boy that you like. And maybe they're going to be smoking a joint, and you're going to feel pressure into that situation because you want to impress them potentially. So let's think about these things now ahead of time. How do you choose? How will you want to react when you're in these situations, instead of acting in the moment? But let's use some foresight and decide ahead of time how we want to react in certain situations where I feel like you're going to be in these situations. And no matter how I choose to parent and what rules I set, I recognize that these are going to come up for you. So let's have conversations about them, and let's try to decide together. And if you need support from me and you have questions from me about this kind of stuff, let's talk about it.
I think that's a really, really important point, and so beautifully put there, William. Thanks for adding that. Before we wrap this up, because we're nearly hitting an hour already, guys. Greg, you said a really awesome comment earlier, and that I'd love you to just touch on. And you said about how children are connected to the learning of what did you say? I've got it written down. Learning the natural connection to their own divinity, their ability to learn through their own connection to their higher self. I'd love for you to just explain what you meant by that, and just explain what it is that you've seen in your children in this connection with the divine.
Yeah. So there is all those ways of oneness, and I think like the child arrives with this natural ability to be, because those actually the work that we learn to do in Masters of Self is about like healing our wounds and removing our programs that are um, like screening us from our own divinity, from our own power, inherent birthright divinity. And so those kids, they reach with that. They're fully present. And then we come over and over to try to teach them the notion of time and thinking ahead, and there is this innocence as well. They're just blank. They just naturally connected to their own divine nature, because they're just arriving from that space, let's say. So there is this very direct, beautiful connection to the divine. Like even in India, when I was traveling India, the sadhus there, they would say, like, if you were God and that you could travel anybody, of course you'd like to travel a kid's body, to be in a kid's body. Like, woohoo!
They seem to be really connected to the awe and the wonder of the world and the universe. I remember like being a kid, and the smallest thing would be like, oh my God, look at all this candy,
Mind blowing.
Just
first day at Toys R Us, right? Like you walk into Toys R Us, you're like,
that is exactly it. You just took me straight back to being in Doncaster and going to Toys R Us for the first time. Wow. Yeah, it felt like the biggest store in the world, and it was like Santa's workshop in there. But that is exactly it. It's they're so connected to the awe and the wonder and the joyous parts of life. And I feel like as humans in this world, we get all this conditioning and programming as children, and by the time we're teenagers, it's so heavily ingrained that we feel like we have to be adult, and we're moving out of all of the essence of what it really means to be alive. And we're focusing on school and a 9-to-5 job, and then we're thinking about a house and kids and a mortgage. And then I don't know about you, I'd love you to comment on this. What was it like then having kids and then bringing that awe and that wonder back into your life? Was there a moment where you all kind of was like, what have I been doing? Like, I could have been living my life like they are, but I'm choosing this path of conditioning and programming. Because I know for me, I would rather live like the innocent child of awe and wonder than the weighed down stresses and the lack of presence of an adult being in the third dimensional matrix in 21st century.
I'd say I'm getting there. That's more like where I'm the trajectory of where I'm heading, more along those lines. But when we're living from our wounding, we don't have that perspective. Like I was so busy living my life and worrying about work and all of the stress that did weigh me down, that really I didn't pay that much attention to it. It was just a part of being a child. Right. So it's just like it's funny because they're so connected. And then our life, the way that that the world is, and all of the programming, like you say. It's just adding all of these layers of distortion onto the child. Before they know it, they're an adult and acting from their own wounding like we are. And then here we are doing the healing work, and we're actually trying to remove all of this distortion and all of these programs to get back our divinity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of this starts with giving yourself permission to do some of these things. Like, how about as a parent starting to play with Legos again? You got a reason to go. And
Let's go.
Permission to play with Legos, or build a sandcastle. Well, it's my kid. I gotta. You give yourself that kind of but you're loving it. You can step into that at any time. You don't have to suppress that. It's great to have the use your child as an excuse to go do that, but you can step into that and live in that joy and wonder. And I think they're a great reminder, right? To have someone invite you to go and jump on a trampoline. You're like, you know what? I am going to go jump on a trampoline right now. That is a fantastic idea.
Like, I'm going to go hurt myself with a backflip. That is a phenomenal idea right now.
Excellent. Well, it seems like, William, you covered the way of connection there. And we also covered, I think, the way of surrender, the way of patience, the way of responsibility, the way of honoring. All these ways that we've been talking about, and they're from the Universal Ways of Oneness, which is taught by Rachel Fiori. The link's down below. This is her new book that she released, and I just wanted to bring it up because we keep mentioning these ways of oneness, and they are the blueprint to an elevated society. They are a blueprint towards us as individuals and as the collective of how to achieve a more enlightened society, coming from a place of more love and less fear, less wounding, less projection of hate. And, this is exactly what we all stand for. So thank you so much for joining us today, if you're listening. And thank you to all the panelists, the wonderful coaches I have before me. This is Masters of Self University podcast. If you've enjoyed this, please share it with somebody, share it with another parent, share it with your children. Share it with whoever you can, and like and subscribe, and join us next time. And we look forward to hearing from you then. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, gents. Have a great day.